Okay, Excellencies, honored guests, experts, ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to welcome you to today's webinar of the Belt and Road Institute in Sweden. My name is Stephen Brawer, and I'm the chairman of the Belt and Road Institute in Sweden, and I'm going to moderate today's event. Our institute has been playing a key role in promoting the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, as the foundation which global economic development, so global economic development can go forward. As many people and participants may already know, this initiative was launched by China's President Xi Jinping in 2013. And since that time, over 150 countries have joined voluntarily in active support and cooperation. And it is an inclusive initiative that is open to all countries. Its continuing success has been based on actual concrete results, especially in the area of infrastructure development and modernization. The global majority has, in a certain sense, spoken out clearly and positively on this issue, yet the global minority, which shouts the loudest about, quote, democracy, only seems to support democracy according to its own rules. However, this type of arbitrary arrogance cannot last much longer. The world is changing extremely rapidly. The great challenge lies in the ability to adjust to and even to embrace an emerging new world order based on cooperation and mutual respect for sovereignty. This is the meaning of a community for a shared future for mankind. Today, we will address some very crucial ideas about economy which are generally little understood or even not understood at all. This is a pioneering effort to elevate and highlight certain concepts. China's high-quality development and what the BRICS has called Belt and Road economics are topics which are characterized by the idea of physical economy. So I'm very honored to welcome our distinguished speakers, all of whom will help to elaborate and develop these concepts for all the participants. So thank you. And I would like to introduce our first honored speaker, Your Excellency, Ambassador Cui, the China People's Republic of China's ambassador to Sweden. Ambassador, you're most welcome.
Thank you. Respected Chairman Brawer, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to attend today's webinar to join the discussion how to promote global economic recovery and development through high-quality BRI cooperation. I'd like to take this opportunity to share some of my views with you. First, I'd like to talk about the overall situation of China's high-quality development. We always believe that development is both the basis for and the key to solving every problem we face. In recent years, China has been actively implementing the new development philosophy, striving to promote high-quality development, pushing forward to foster a new pattern of development, and has made remarkable achievements. China's economic strength has been significantly increased. Fruitful gains have been made in scientific and technological innovation. People's livelihood has been improved comprehensively. Ecological environment has been continuously improved. Steady progress has been made in opening up. For more than a decade, China's GDP has increased from 54 trillion yuan to 126 trillion yuan, accounting for over 17% of the global GDP, averagely contributing over 1/3 to world economic growth. According to global media forecast, China will be the top contributor to global economic growth over the next 5 years, with its contribution exceeding that of all G7 countries combined. Despite the complex situation of growing instability and uncertainty in the global economic development, the basic trend sustaining the long-term growth of China's economy has not changed. For more than a decade, China's science and technology have advanced by leaps and bounds, striving to become a breeding ground for new scientific discoveries, new technological inventions, new industrial directions, and new development ideas. In 2023, China's nationwide R&D spending rose to 3.3 trillion RMB. China is home to the largest cohort of R&D personnel in the world. China's comprehensive ranking of innovation capability rose to the 10th place in the world. The dynamics of new productive forces have further stimulated scientific and technological innovation. Substantial progress has been made in the research and development of high-end equipment, such as aircraft engines, gas turbines, and fourth-generation nuclear power units. Innovations keep emerging in frontier areas, such as artificial intelligence and quantum technology. For more than a decade, we have won the largest, the toughest, and most effective battle against poverty in human history, and built the largest education, social security, and health care systems in the world. In 2023, China's per capita disposable income increased by 6.1%, with the number of people in the middle income bracket reaching over 400 million. The urban-rural income gap continues to narrow. The sense of fulfillment, happiness, and security for the people has become more complete and lasting. For more than a decade, the view that lucid waters and large mountains are invaluable assets has become widely shared across China. And a major strategic success has been made in keeping our skies blue, our waters clear, and our lands pollution-free. With efforts, China's energy intensity decreased 26.4% in the past decade, making China one of the countries which have seen the farthest reduction in energy intensity. And it has exceeded its target of carbon emission intensity reduction pledged to the international community. Now, China has built the biggest clean power generation system in the world. The environmental quality has continuously been improved, and green has become the defining feature of China's development. For more than a decade, the number of countries and regions taking China as a major trading partner has increased to more than 140. China's FTA partners has reached 29, and the overall tariff level has dropped to 7.3%. In the past 5 years, the return rate of foreign direct investment in China is around 9%, which is at a relatively high level in the world. Last October, China announced that it would completely remove restrictions on foreign investment in the manufacturing sector and continue to open up the development opportunities of China's manufacturing industry to global investors. The international influence and appeal of the BRI have become more evident, and all-around high-level open economy has accelerated to take shape. We often say that China can only do well when the world is doing well. And when China does well, the world will get even better. China's high-quality development has brought new opportunities to the world. And the BRI is a gift to make the world a better place. For more than a decade, with joint efforts from all parties, the BRI has taken root and flourished. It has become the world's broadest based and largest platform for international cooperation, generating new impetus and creating new opportunities for global economic growth, and has become an economic buzzword attracting the attention of global economists. Generally speaking, there are three major reasons for the remarkable achievements of BRI cooperation in the past decade. The first is relying on China's high-quality development achievements and providing abundant products, technologies, capital, and market for BRI partner countries. As the world's second-largest economy, China has the world's most complete industrial chain, advanced construction of infrastructure projects, leading technological innovation capability, and huge foreign exchange reserves. The vitality and potential of China's enormous market have been continuously unleashed, and China's status as the world's factory and the world's market has become more stable. China has signed more than 200 BRI cooperation documents with more than 150 countries and over 30 international organizations. From 2013 to 2023, the total import and export volume between China and BRI partner countries has exceeded $21 trillion. The loans of the Export-Import Bank of China for BRI projects have driven over $400 billion of investment and over $2 trillion of trade. The second is meeting the development needs of BRI partner countries and helping these countries to promote economic development and realize industrialization and modernization. BRI partner countries have long been subject to problems such as lack of infrastructure, limited production capacity, inadequate technology, and financing difficulties. And there is huge demand for connectivity among these countries. China's supply capacity in terms of capital, technology, and management is highly compatible. With joint efforts of all parties, a general connectivity framework consisting of 6 corridors, 6 connectivity routes, and multiple countries and ports have been put in place. A number of signature projects, including China-Laos Railway, Jakarta-Bandung High-Speed Railway, and Piraeus Port, have been built and put into operation. The China-Europe Railway Express service has provided new Eurasian land transport route, providing strong support for the economic and social development of BRI partnership countries. The third is following the concept of win-win cooperation and to promote common development of all countries while pursuing our own development. Guided by the vision of a community with a shared future for mankind, the BRI involves countries in different regions, different development stages, and with different cultures, transcends differences in ideologies and social systems, and enables all countries to share opportunities, pursue common development, and achieve common prosperity. Under the framework of BRI cooperation, Chinese and foreign partners have launched more than 20 multilateral dialogue and cooperation mechanisms in energy, environmental protection, think tanks, media, and other fields. More than 60 cities from BRI partner countries have established more than 1,000 sister city pairs with many Chinese cities. China has also successfully held 3 Belt and Road forums for international cooperation, providing an important platform for participating countries and international organizations to deepen exchanges, enhance mutual trust, and strengthen exchanges. Dear friends, it is under the guidance of the vision of a community with a shared future for mankind that the BRI has been transformed from idea into action and from vision into reality, achieving solid and significant results and providing a clear answer to a new model of global governance and world economic development. As a responsible major developing country, China will continue to take the BRI as a top-level design of the path of opening up and win-win cooperation between China and the rest of the world. We will open up in a wider scope, in more areas and a higher level, increase resources input in global development cooperation, and make positive contributions to common development of all countries in the world. A great cause calls for wide support and participation. In the pursuit of high-quality BRI cooperation, all countries, including European countries, are equal participants, contributors, and beneficiaries. In fact, China has signed various forms of cooperation documents with nearly 30 European countries, and a large number of cooperation projects in infrastructure, logistics, ports, e-commerce, and finance are moving forward smoothly. We sincerely welcome more countries and international organizations, including Sweden, to join in the big family of BRI and jointly promote world connectivity and global sustainable development. China is ready to work with all parties in the spirit of partnership to seek win-win results through greater openness and cooperation, avoid fragmentation, refrain from setting inhibitive thresholds for cooperation, or pursuing exclusive arrangements and reject protectionism. We will jointly create new opportunities for development, seek new drivers for development, expand a new space for development, and share new fruits of development so as to inject new and strong impetus into building our community with a shared future for mankind. Thank you all.
Yes, thank you so much, Ambassador Cui, for your remarks. I gladly accept your invitation that Sweden should be actively cooperating and joining with the Belt and Road Initiative. We have also 2 participants in the panel today, one from Norway and one from Holland, Netherlands. I hope that they will also endorse their nations joining together.
Very
And we are, yes, then we are moving forward. So I really appreciate your contribution today. Our next speaker, Mr. Jan Hopma from Innovation Bridge. He has been working actively to build cooperation between his country and companies to embrace the idea of cooperation and development, especially in the area of environmental, green, and sustainable development. And I will gladly give the word now to Mr. Hopma to expand and give us the perspective from his vantage point.
Thank you, Stephen, for your kind introduction. Distinguished Ambassador Cui, distinguished guests, it's my pleasure to speak to you on this webinar. In my speech, I would like to focus on the opportunities that the Belt and Road Initiative presents for European companies in the field of green and sustainable development. Additionally, I also will touch on the challenges we face in fostering collaboration within the current geopolitical landscape between Europe and China and how we can address them effectively. Oh. Okay. I want to go to the next slide. Oh. What happens? How can I go to the next slide? Yes, sorry. The global urgency to address climate change and environmental sustainability has never been more important. China's commitment to reducing carbon emissions, as outlined in its ambitious goals to peak carbon dioxide emissions before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality before 2060, creates a substantial demand for green technologies and sustainable practices. China is the main trading partner of more than 140 countries and is one of the best positioned countries to define the pace and speed of global supply chain green transition. In China, this work is already underway. More than 800 large Chinese companies have set carbon neutrality by 2060 targets. Especially across the ICT, the textile, and the manufacturing sectors, businesses are seeking to reach carbon neutrality ahead of national climate targets. By 2050, China needs roughly $26 trillion green investment. This all presents a golden opportunity for collaboration with Europe in the field of green technology and innovation. In my speech, I would like to focus specifically on the opportunities for European companies, industrial partnerships, R&D collaboration, and talent exchange. European firms have a rich history of pioneering advancements in renewable energy, waste management, water purification, and sustainable agriculture. The collaboration with China can be mutually beneficial. While European companies can tap into the vast Chinese market, China can benefit from European expertise and cutting-edge technologies. For instance, companies specializing in wind and solar energy can find opportunities in China's extensive renewable energy projects. The nation's push towards increasing a share of renewables in its energy mix drives the need for advanced technologies and expertise that European companies have. Also, the development of smart grid technologies, crucial for managing the distribution of renewable energy, presents another road for collaboration. European innovations in energy storage solutions can also play an important role in China's energy strategy. As renewable energy sources like wind and solar are not stable, efficient energy storage systems are essential to ensure a stable energy supply. European companies with advanced battery technologies and other energy storage solutions can collaborate with Chinese firms to develop and implement these systems on a large scale. The Belt and Road Initiative emphasizes the development of industrial parks as hubs for economic activity and innovation. These parks are strategically located to facilitate trade, investment, and technological exchanges. By partnering with Chinese industrial parks, European parks can also create synergies that drive mutual growth and development. One of the primary benefits of such partnerships is the exchange of knowledge and expertise. European parks can share their best practices in sustainable industrial development, efficient resource management, and environmental conservation. In return, Chinese parks can provide insights into scaling up production and penetrating the vast Asian markets. Moreover, these partnerships can lead to mutual market access. European companies can leverage the infrastructure and networks of Chinese industrial parks to enter the Chinese markets more effectively. Conversely, Chinese companies can use European parks as gateways to access the European market, thereby enhancing trade and investment flows between the two regions. Research and development collaboration is another critical area where industrial park partnerships can thrive. Joint R&D initiatives can focus on developing new technologies and solutions that address global challenges such as climate change, pollution, and resource scarcity. By pooling resources and expertise, European and Chinese parks can accelerate innovation and bring new products and services to market effectively. Innovation is the driving force behind sustainable development. European companies and research institutes have a long-standing tradition, and research institutions in R&D, particularly in the fields related to green technology and environmental sustainability. Collaborating with Chinese counterparts can enhance the scope and impact of the R&D efforts. Joint research initiatives can tackle a wide range of challenges, from developing new renewable energy technologies to improving energy efficiency in industrial processes. For example, European and Chinese researchers can work together to create more efficient solar panels, advanced wind turbines, and innovative energy storage systems. These collaborations can lead to breakthroughs that not only benefit both regions, but also contribute to sustainability efforts globally. And government-supported programs, academic exchanges, and private sector initiatives can facilitate these collaborations. By fostering a culture of innovation and cooperation, Europe and China can address common challenges and create new opportunities for economic growth and development. Human capital is another critical area where Europe and China can collaborate effectively. Talent exchange programs that allow scientists, engineers, and professionals to work in each other's countries can foster a deeper understanding and create a pool of talent well-versed in both European and Chinese contexts. These exchanges can be facilitated through academic institutions research organizations, and industry partnerships. For example, European universities can partner with Chinese institutions to offer joint degree programs, research fellowships, and internships. These programs can help develop a new generation of professionals who are knowledgeable about the cultures, markets, and technologies of both regions. Such exchanges can also lead to cross-pollination of ideas and skills, driving innovation and enhancing the competitiveness of both regions. By working together, Europe and China can develop new technologies, products, and services that address global challenges and create new economic opportunities. But while the opportunities for collaboration between Europe and China are vast, it's essential to acknowledge the challenges posed by current geopolitical situation. The relationship between Europe and China has become increasingly complex due to various geopolitical, economic, and social factors. Geopolitical tensions between Europe and China have intensified in the recent years, driven by issues such as trade imbalances, human rights concerns, and strategic competition. These tensions can create an uncertain environment for business and investment, making it challenging for European companies to engage with Chinese counterparts. For example, trade disputes between China and the European Union can lead to tariffs, trade barriers, and regulatory hurdles that complicate business operations. Moreover, geopolitical tensions can also result in increased scrutiny of foreign investments and technology transfers, adding layers of complexity to collaboration efforts. Regulatory and policy differences between Europe and China can also pose significant challenges to collaboration. For instance, differing standards and regulations in areas such as environmental protection, intellectual property rights, and data privacy can create barriers to market entry and cooperation. European companies must navigate China's regulatory landscape, which can be complex and subject to change. Understanding and complying with local regulations, securing necessary permits, and managing regulatory risks require significant resources and expertise. Similarly, these Chinese companies seeking to enter the European market must adhere to stringent EU regulations and standards, which can be challenging and costly. Cultural and language barriers can also impede effective communication and collaboration between European and Chinese companies. Differences in business practices, management styles, and communication norms can lead to misunderstanding and inefficiencies. For example, European companies may find it challenging to navigate a hierarchical and relationship-oriented business culture in China. Conversely, Chinese companies may struggle to adapt to the more egalitarian and individualistic business culture in Europe. Language differences can also hinder effective communication and collaboration, making it essential to invest in language training and cross-cultural competence. Technology and data security concerns are increasingly prominent in the context of Europe-China collaboration as companies exchange technologies and share data. Protecting intellectual property and ensuring data security become critical issues. European companies may have concerns about protecting their intellectual property when collaborating with Chinese partners, given the differences in IP enforcement and protection standards. Similarly, data security and privacy issues can arise when sharing sensitive information across borders, especially in the light of differing data protection regulations in Europe and China. And navigating the political landscape is another challenge for European companies seeking to collaborate with Chinese partners. The political climate can influence business decisions, investment flows, and regulatory policies, creating an unpredictable environment for collaboration. For instance, changes in government policies, shifts in diplomatic relations, and political pressures can impact the feasibility and success of collaboration efforts. Companies must stay informed about political developments and adapt their strategies accordingly to mitigate risks and seize opportunities. Despite these challenges, there are several strategies that European companies can adopt to foster successful collaboration with Chinese partners. Building strong relationships based on trust and mutual understanding is essential for successful collaboration. Companies should invest time and resources in developing long-term relationship with their Chinese counterparts. This involves regular communication, face-to-face meetings, and cultural exchange programs to build rapport and trust. Developing a deep understanding of Chinese business culture, values, and practices can also help European companies navigate the complexities of collaboration. Cross-cultural training and hiring local experts can facilitate smoother interactions and enhance the effectiveness of joint initiatives. Government support can play also a crucial role in facilitating collaboration between European and Chinese companies. Governments can provide funding, incentives, and support programs to encourage joint ventures, R&D collaborations, and talent exchanges. For example, European companies can leverage EU-funded programs and initiatives to promote innovation and international collaboration. Similarly, Chinese government programs that support foreign investment and technological cooperation can provide valuable resources and support. Ensuring regulatory compliance is critical for successful collaboration. European companies must stay informed about the regulatory landscape in China and invest in legal and compliance expertise to navigate local regulations. Engaging with local regulatory authorities, industry associations, and legal experts can help companies understand and comply with relevant regulations. Similarly, these Chinese companies seeking to enter the European market should familiarize themselves with EU regulations and standards and seek guidance from legal and compliance experts. Protecting IP, intellectual property, is a key concern for European companies collaborating with Chinese partners. Companies should implement robust IP protection strategies, including registering patents, trademarks, and copyrights in both Europe and China. Negotiating then clear IP arrangements and contracts with Chinese partners is essential to safeguard intellectual property rights. Companies should also invest in monitoring and enforcement mechanisms to detect and address any potential IP infringements. Data security is a critical issue in Europe-China cooperation. Companies should implement comprehensive data protection and cybersecurity measures to safeguard sensitive information. This includes encrypting data, securing networks, and adhering to relevant data protection regulations. Engaging with data security experts and investing in advanced cybersecurity technologies can help mitigate data security risks. Companies should also establish clear data sharing protocols and agreements with their Chinese partners to ensure the protection of sensitive information. In conclusion, the Belt and Road Initiative presents a unique opportunity for European companies to engage with China in a meaningful way. By focusing on green and sustainable development, we can create partnerships that not only benefit our economies, but also contribute to a more sustainable and prosperous world. While the current geopolitical landscape poses challenges, these can be navigated with strategic planning, robust relationships, and a commitment to mutual understanding. European companies must actively seek out opportunities, leverage their expertise, and build lasting relationships with Chinese partners. Together, we can achieve high-quality development that sets a benchmark for global collaboration and sustainability. Let us embrace the opportunities and overcome the challenges to create a brighter future for all. Finally, I would like to share my contact details. Oh, that's too quick. In case you want to learn more about collaboration opportunities for your organization in China. Thank you for your attention.
Very good. Thank you, Jan Hopma. Your remarks, I think, were excellent in raising the question of industrial parks, which very few people understand the opportunity that has actually emerged in many parts of even one of the largest in Belarus, the Great Stone Industrial Park, which China has worked together with Belarus in building. And these are the types of solutions that would even lay the foundation for resolving some of the challenges and geopolitical problems which you identified, even in building, putting an end to this horrendous conflict in Ukraine and start building industrial parks to rebuild and see the role of Ukraine and other countries in cooperating with the Belt and Road Initiative. So the intention of wanting to establish good relations is the fundamental key point, that there will be obstacles. Always in history, we will have obstacles. But if the intention is cooperation, then you overcome obstacles. If the intention is to pose obstacles to prevent cooperation, that's when the problems that are creating dangerous circumstances for humanity right now. So we in the Belt and Road Institute in Sweden are going to continue to work for greater cooperation. So thank you so much for your input. The next speaker, Professor Glenn Diesen, is a good friend. He has actually been a speaker in the previous webinars. He happens to be a scholar in a type of economic thinking that historically has been virtually buried or has disappeared from all of the educational institutions, which has to do with the issue of physical economy and what is called the American system of political economy. He has done his own independent research on that, and he will make a presentation today, which I think is a framework and a foundation for how we can actually bring the European economies and Western economies back into a collaborative effort with China that will massively increase the success and development for humanity as a whole. So this has historical relevance, but it is very relevant for a solution in many of the overriding problems that are facing European and Western, including the United States, economies right now today. I just mentioned the United States today is not operating off of the American system concepts, but we would hope that this could be changed and would be a great step towards solving many of the problems that we are facing. So, Professor Diesen, you are welcome to have the floor now.
Thank you very much. And well, yeah, that's actually my topic today. It's the rise of China, because there tends to be, well, at least here in the West, growing hostility, at least among the political class, but this is often linked to the loss of hegemony. But my argument is that this news spread, the new international distribution of power, will actually be more beneficial, not just for us, but also the world eventually. And because we can even go back these days, of course, liberalism has become more of an ideology, and we tend to forget that it was meant to be one tool in the box, not the silver bullet to everything. Even Adam Smith, you know, he wrote once that the discovery of America and the passage to the East Indies were the two greatest discoveries in history, simply because it connected the world. However, he did also recognize that it resulted in what he referred to as dreadful misfortune for the natives who met the Europeans. And the reason why was the uneven distribution of power, the hegemonic format. which led to a very exploitationist and imperial format for how the West interacted with the world, one which would also undermine our own economies eventually. So what he argued was that a more equal distribution of wealth in the rest of the world would result in much more fair and peaceful world. And so he hoped that in the future you would see other parts of the world rising, or even if the Europeans would be somewhat weaker, if you had more of an equilibrium, you could have a economy where trade and economic interdependence actually created more peace and cooperation instead of this exploitation. So one has to ask why there's so much hostility towards the rise of China, because obviously it's much of the world has been risen out of poverty. You see these infrastructure projects being expanded across the world, and of course when China travels around the world, it's very much welcomed. As is always pointed out, it comes with cooperation and not to give lectures. So I think the main argument we always have against China is, you know, they're breaking with economic liberalism by financing strategic industries and all of this. But I would point out that no major power in the world has risen either to greatness on pure market capitalism and free market, that is, and also that some intervention in the market has always been advocated as something positive. So, for example, one of the things which Stephen Brawer pointed out has been buried in history is the idea that how, for example, Britain rose to power. You know, the British, they rose not on economic liberalism alone. They actually had a very vigorous industrial policy with government subsidies. They tried to take, well, they ensured to control the seas, and also they then had the establishment of the dominant currency and the main banks. And this, once they had this position of dominance, this is when they embraced, of course, they repealed the Corn Laws and promoted economic liberalism, not as a format solely of cooperation, but one of cementing the hegemony. And this was very much clear in the debates they had around the Corn Laws. This was Britain would produce for the world, and the rest of the world could do the agricultural work. And again, this did not set up the economic system as Smith would have suggested to be based on cooperation. And again, there's a famous quote by Friedrich List in 1841 where he explains that, you know, this was a very clever device, that anyone who has attained greatness, you know, he will kick away the ladder he has climbed up on in order to deprive others of the means of climbing up after him. And this was to a large extent what the American system was based on as well, as List worked with Alexander Hamilton, and well, at least on these ideas. And the whole idea was, you know, if you had always, the reason why a hegemon will always then insist on having no intervention in market, even though it does it itself, is because mature industries will always be able to outcompete infant industries. The mature industries are obviously high quality, low cost, and it's very hard for other countries to rise in this world if they are infant industries. So by definition, they're low quality and high cost. So what the American system set out to do was, of course, with using temporary subsidies and tariffs in order to develop industrial capability. And this is simply because industrial sovereignty was linked to political sovereignty. As countries who become excessively reliant on only one other actor, you will see them diminished, and often they can have their political sovereignty undermined. So for that reason, I argue that the American system consisted of three pillars. They had the manufacturing base, physical connectivity with transportation corridors. On third was financial, so its own national bank. And it was through this which they were able to have a more just relationship. They did not succumb to British dominance anymore. They were able to cement their political sovereignty, and other countries began to copy this system. The French and the Germans, they followed to a large extent these three pillars in terms of developing their own industries, developing their own transportation corridors, and more sovereign control over banking. Even Japan went down this path where he had people like Patient Smith, who was a big advocate of the American system who went to work as an advisor for the Japanese emperor in the 1870s. For a large part of the motivation of Japan was, of course, they had seen what happened to China in the Great Opium Wars, in which they were destroyed by the British. And this also demonstrated the need to have your own sovereign control over your industries, also not to lose control over key transportation corridors or maritime corridors to the British, and also the financial aspect. So what can be used as a currency, for example. And well, long story short, the Russians also followed this system towards the end of the 19th century with their foreign minister, Sergei Witte, who then explicitly handed out pamphlets with Hamilton and the List's idea. And they then also began to industrialize in a very fast. They developed their railroads from Europe to Asia, and of course began to establish greater financial autonomy, thus becoming the fastest growing power in the late 19th century. So there's a long history behind this. Now I'm not, and I often try to put what China has done in the context of this, what all other countries have done when they rise to greatness. And as we see with China, what have they done? Well, now they're challenging to a large extent the American position, because what the Americans used to develop independence from the British, they've since used to develop dominance, that is to control the main industries in the world, to control all the maritime transportation corridors, to dominate the only currencies, only trade currency, only reserve currency. Now, for China, they've to some extent followed a similar model, but with some crucial differences. So again, this three-pillar system, China has a very vigorous industrial policy, especially then with the China 2025 and taking a leadership role, I would say, in many of our key strategic industries. On the Belt and Road Initiative, also developing much physical corridors, but unlike, I would say, I think it's important that they keep referring to it as the New Silk Road, because what the Europeans did with the maritime corridors from the early 16th century was to establish a dominant position in the world, that is to have sole control over key maritime highways. Now, what we see with China is they haven't actually pursued a hegemonic position in this way. And you see this with competing corridors for physical connectivity. They don't oppose it, indeed, from the cooperation with other states, but also the more, not ideology, but the more ideas of a multipolar world. They're actually embracing it. As they keep saying with this global civilization initiative, there can't only be one center of power, can't only be one civilization, there has to be several. So while the Chinese have been developing this Belt and Road Initiative with greater physical connectivity, I think it demonstrates that it's a form of pushing for a multipolar system with several centers of power without seeking to control any of them. And the same goes for the development banks and trade in national currencies, new payment systems. We see that this becomes anti-hegemonic. It's not even anti-American, which we keep being told, because it's not undermining one country, it's undermining a hegemonic system only. So I think what we're seeing is simply not just another power rising like the former, but indeed it's emergence of a new international system for economic cooperation. And this is where I think in the West we go all wrong, because we tend to see this as a winner-takes-all approach, in which the winner will effectively be the next hegemon. But there's very little that indicates that China is actually aiming for hegemony. And which is why I'm also a big advocate for why Norway and Europe should seek greater cooperation with China, simply to be able to diversify our economic partnerships as well, and not fall back into this hegemonic system where we become excessively reliant only on the United States. And lastly, I would just like to say, this can also be a good corrective measure for the West, because well, again, I think we should welcome this new China model, because we used to have a similar system under industrial capitalism. That is, while we still had a physical economy. Keep in mind that even economic liberals, be it Adam Smith or John Stuart Mill, David Ricardo, they all recognized the danger of economic power concentrating over time. And this is why Smith recognized that free market efficiency, yes, it produces maximized efficiency. However, there will always be need to reform that. And then this is why formulating economic liberalism as a hegemonic policy has been so dangerous, because one of the key concerns now for the Americans when they look at China is simply that they can't compete anymore. But part of the reasons why they can't compete is not really the Chinese fault. This is something even economic liberals recognized for decades, was that they were concerned about rent seekers who did not participate in the production process. You know, this results in less competitive industries and the emergence of oligarchs. And so a key argument in the 19th century was we needed to tax rent seekers, and the income could be used to finance infrastructure, fund education, other activities which would elevate both the standard of living as well as improve economic competitiveness. Now, this sounds very alien for anyone who thinks of economic liberalism today, which is effectively cheering on the rent seekers and this concentration of wealth. So my point is simply that I think in the West there's a huge need now for some great reforms in our economies, and towards this end, I think we should be looking more towards China, not just as a partner, but also recognizing how our economic model isn't functioning anymore. And one of the reasons is we linked this liberal economic system to a hegemonic system, which allowed a lot of rot to set in. Yes, anyways, I think I went a bit over time, so I'll thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for your input there. It's very important that you identified the aspects of this American system concept with its focus on a national bank and a investment towards manufacturing infrastructure, and having a credit system which is not based on monetary gain solely as a criteria, which is what dominates the present monetary failures and failure to understand physical economy, which is one of the main themes that we are identifying here in both high quality development of economy in China, as well as what you've pointed now in terms of the history of even European history, and especially when the United States was actually oriented towards a development perspective for world economic progress. That, unfortunately, since the end of World War II has not been the case. But my colleague, Mr. Askary, will also, after the remarks of Professor Ding from China, he will also elaborate on this question of Belt and Road economics and physical economy. As I said in my remarks, this is a very essential concept that it becomes discussed and understood. And I'm very happy that this webinar can introduce these ideas for not only our participants, but for the general public in the world. So now I would like to give the word to my colleague who will present a video from Professor Ding of China on high quality economic development. Unfortunately, he could not be with us live, but we will hear from him now.
It's a great pleasure to talk again at the Swedish Institute on Belt and Road Initiative. So it's a pleasure talking to all of you about the future plan of the Belt and Road Initiative, but also about Chinese high quality development. Because last year, at the third summit conferences on Belt and Road and international cooperation, Chinese President Xi Jinping just said that we will plan the next decade's Belt and Road initiative, because we are just commemorating the 10th anniversary of the Belt and Road, and next decade we will build a high-quality Belt and Road project to some extent. So, to some extent, the high-quality Belt and Road project and China's high-quality growth are going hand in hand in the same direction. So, the high-quality Belt and Road project are in accordance with Chinese government's its own high-quality development strategy. To assess the success of this high-quality development strategy, we have to pay more attention to Chinese government efforts to avoid so-called middle-income countries trap, because according to World Bank analysis, some countries reaching a sort of middle-income countries will meet a lot of obstacles. If they cannot overcome those obstacles, they cannot go upstairs to go to the upper bridge, upper stage of the supply chain. So they may be trapped by the middle-income country trap. So that's why Chinese government paid a lot of attention pushing forward Chinese scientific and technology innovations. Remember that in 2015, Chinese government worked out a plan called Made in China 2025. That was a 10 years plan for scientific and technology development. And we are ahead of this plan. So there is still 1 year for the Made in China 2025. But looking back to the realization of this plan of Made in China 2025, we have almost accomplished more than 85% of this target set in 2015. So we have already accomplished the plan. During the plan, there is a lot of targets, such as development of space science and technology. And in these sectors, China have made tremendous progress in space science and technology. We have landed a vehicle on the far side of the moon. Then our rocket has brought back those vehicles with moon soil. So Chinese scientists are analyzing moon soil in order to discover some real elements that could be useful on our planet. And we don't have on our planet, but we can use some new natural resources hidden in the moon. So that's a big advance in space science and space technology. Apart from these, we also made tremendous progress in renewable energy development. China today is the biggest producer of renewable energy. China's photovoltaic generation of electricity represents more than 38% of the global photovoltaic generation electricity. So it's a huge amount of electricity. That's why China can produce so much electric vehicles, because nowadays the electricity prices in China, I mean the renewable electricity prices produced by those renewable energies, either solar, wind, or hydrogen. In all these sectors, the prices of electricity goes down so much that they are cheaper than traditionally coal burning power stations. So that's why China can afford to produce so many electric vehicles, because those consumers, those Chinese who buy those electric vehicles, can run the car at 1/10 prices of the oil, because traditionally you have to run your car, so you have to make the full of your essence and so forth and so forth. The prices today of the fuel goes for your vehicle. So today, if you run on electric vehicles, the fuel prices will go to 1/10 of previous essence prices. So that's a tremendous change that can make the life of Chinese people much more sustainable. So that's how China is making those progress on renewable energy and electric vehicles. And I think that China is looking for partners along the Belt and Road countries. So nowadays, China is exporting this technology in many BRICS countries, for example, to Russia, to Brazil, probably to South Africa. And then we will try to help all these countries, those participating countries of the Belt and Road, to continue to improve their facilities, their infrastructure, including infrastructures with regard to electricity grid. Those, because you have to improve your grid in order to provide more cheaper and renewable electricity to your EV, and all these are part of the next decade's Belt and Road projects. So that's something very important. On the other hand, China is looking for developing its own so-called new quality productive forces. So new quality productive forces means that we will upgrade on the level of the global supply chain. But it's not so easy, because we have to develop a traditional, we have to renovate classical traditional manufacturing sectors by introducing more digital technology, by introducing more industrial software, and that's a big challenge. So we will do these to improve and renovate current manufacturing equipment and machines, to make them more performant and to make them more efficient. On the other hand, to push up the new quality productive forces, you have to train more innovative talents. So in order to train more innovative talents, you have to work out a new mindset. So they will be able to improve the production procedure, and they will be able to even to provide new ideas and the new product to the market. All of these need time, all these need investment, investment in education, investment in improving your classical and traditional equipment and production instruments. So all these are very important steps that China is taking. And then China wanted to also to generate this kind of procedure, this kind of technology with other countries along Silk Road, Belt and Roads. But China's development model, such as a new quality model, has been blamed, criticized by a few Western medias, especially by some Western governments, because they blame Chinese government for subsidizing new renewable energy or EV. But we know that even the United States and European Union are also subsidizing those kind of sectors. So let's take an example of Biden administration. Since Biden came to power, so they have decided to pass a bill, to adopt a bill to provide a more subsidy, government subsidy, to support their renewable energy and EV sectors. They have adopted a bill called anti-inflation bill. But the anti-inflation bill has nothing to do with inflation, but to subsidize their so-called key sectors. Those key sectors include renewable energy and EVs. They decided to use more than $1 trillion public finance to subsidize those kind of sectors. But so far, they don't make as much progress as China does. So only subsidy cannot push forward your innovation or your technology innovation. So and blame China. They said that China is using its overcapacity to influence other markets, the Western markets, European Union and the United States. That's why Biden administration decided to impose a 100% of tariffs against Chinese export of these vehicles. But so far, it's a symbolic because they don't need so many Chinese EVs. Last year, we have only exported a few tens of thousands of Chinese EVs to the United States. It's very limited. But recently, European Commission decided to impose also a tariff on Chinese export of vehicles, pretending that because Chinese exporting is overcapacity. But it's totally absurd because in economics, you don't have something related to export of overcapacity. If you look at automobile industry, many countries nowadays export their automobiles more than their domestic consumptions. Take the example of Germany, for example. 80% of German-made cars are devoted to export. And Japan also, more than 50% of Japan-made cars are devoted to export to the international market, not to Japanese market. So can we say that Japan and Germany is exporting their overcapacity? The same reason can be applied to, for example, Boeing or Airbus. So the huge majority of airplanes made by Boeing and Airbus are devoted to export to other countries, to the global market, not to the US market or only to European market. So it's totally absurd to see that if some country or some sector of a country export more than the domestic sale, the country is exporting its overcapacity. It's totally wrong. It's totally absurd. So in international trade, people talk about comparative advantage. China have an evident comparative advantage in producing EV, renewable energy. Why should those Western countries limit Chinese export of these vehicles to Europe or to the United States? So where are those pundits of free trade? And so for quite a long time, the Westerners are really disciples of free trade and liberalism. But nowadays, when they are not as competitive as Chinese industries, they are pretending that China is unfair. So I cannot understand why those Westerners cannot play on the same ground as China does. So in the next decade, China will try to export those new quality growth model to more and more Belt and Road countries, because we wanted to export our capacity, producing electric vehicles, production of renewable energies, so that all these countries can benefit from low price electricity, renewable and sustainable. And then if you can produce electricity cheaply, you can provide your EVs, your electric vehicles with cheap electricity, and that will be compatible with your long-term development that will meet your demand of carbon emission reduction. So all these are in the project of next decades of Belt and Road. I think that we have a lot of common interests and common ground in the next decades alongside the Belt and Road project. Thank you.
As Stephen said, what we are trying to do at the Belt and Road Institute in Sweden is to establish a certain understanding of economic science as related to the Belt and Road Initiative, because there is a lot of misunderstanding and vagueness about what really constitute the economics of the Belt and Road. Many people think it's about trade, it's about investments, it's about infrastructure, but there is something missing in understanding in a systematic way what also Stephen was talking about, physical economics, which has very little or nothing to do with money, finance, or trade per se. So it's our ambition to start this discussion and work with scholars, with experts and others to establish this, what we can call a Belt and Road economics science. It's not separated from economics, but it's economics as physical economics. So, and also the idea of the, unfortunately, we couldn't hear Professor Ding Yifan because he has his definition, what it means, what the high quality development in the Chinese sense means. But I will try to explain it in my own way, because there was certain things that are related to the history, the modern history of the world economy, which in a way forced that shift to the high quality development. Although the Chinese leadership has had a very long-term plan for the development of China, but there are certain things that happened. For example, the 2008 global financial crisis, which should have been the biggest wake-up call for the world, especially the Western world. But it was actually a wake-up call for China and its leaders to transit from a high-quantity, low-end economy to high-quality, upper-end, advanced industrial economy. Now, the world needs to learn from China's shift to this high-quality development process to understand the Belt and Road itself. So when the largest markets in the world, the United States and EU, collapsed in 2008, 2009, China was left standing alone with a big 40-foot container on its back. But China moved quickly to redeem itself of the burden of being the world's cheap factory. It has become, and continues to this date, the economic engine of the world. And we all should be grateful for that. I'm going to read a quote. You might guess who said this. It is, what is the purpose of economic development and what is the purpose of credit and money? It says, quote, to cherish and stimulate the activity of the human mind by multiplying the objects of enterprise is not among the least considerable of the expedients by which the wealth of a nation may be promoted, end of quote. Now, this is not Adam Smith, it's not Karl Marx. It is, as Professor Glenn Diesen mentioned, it's by one of the main founding fathers of the American Republic and the first Treasury Secretary, Finance Minister of the United States, Alexander Hamilton. He said this within his report on the subject of manufactures to the US Congress. And he argued that the purpose of issuing credit is to promote manufacturers in the new republic by stimulating the creative powers of its citizens. So creativity and the mind of the individual citizens is the most valuable asset of a nation's wealth. So I have had, and I advise people to read President Xi Jinping's speeches, the collections, there are 4 books like this, to really understand where China is going, how these concepts of economics, what are they based on? So one of the, I wrote a paper on the importance of redefining sustainable development. The term itself is conflicting because it means something different in China than we have in the West. sustainable development, according to Xi Jinping, described in a speech which is titled "A Deeper Understanding of the New Development Concepts," which he delivered on January 18, 2016. That he uses the term coordinated development, and he says this has acquired new features. This was 2016. He says, quote, "Coordinated development is the unity of weakness and potential in development. China is in a stage of transition from a middle-income country to a high-income country. According to international experience, this is a stage of concentrated conflicts of interest, in which imbalanced development and various weaknesses are inevitable. To pursue coordinated development, we should identify and improve our weaknesses so as to tap development potential and sustain growth momentum." End of quote. In another speech in 2018, Xi thoroughly described the goals of development set out by him and by the Communist Party in China, and clearly explained his understanding of what he called the scientific outlook on development. In point 4 of his speech, which is titled "Adopting a New Vision of Development," Xi Jinping said, quote, "Development is the underpinning and the key for solving our country's problems. We must pursue a model of sustainable development featuring increased production, higher living standards, and healthy ecosystems." End of quote. So rather than focusing on limited resources and how to divide them, which is the concept in the West about sustainable development, Xi Jinping often uses the metaphor of, rather than fighting over a small cake or a pie, we should make the pie bigger or make many pies so everybody can get enough. So most of our indoctrinated so-called experts in the West would see this, what is Xi Jinping is saying, as a contradiction of terms, because they believe that increased production and raising the living standard causes ecological problem and will inevitably hit the wall of limited resources. Even more provocative to Western observers are Xi Jinping's repeated calls for the industrialization of Africa. In a speech he delivered at the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, the FOCAC, in Johannesburg, South Africa in 2015, Xi Jinping said, quote, "Industrialization is an inevitable path to a country's economic success. Within a short span of several decades, China has accomplished what took developed countries hundreds of years to accomplish, and put in place a complete industrial system with an enormous production capacity. It is entirely possible for Africa, as the world's most promising region in terms of development potential, to bring into play its advantages and achieve great success. The achievement of inclusive and sustainable development in Africa hinges on industrialization, which holds the key to creating jobs, eradicating poverty, and improving people's living standards." End of quote. Now, this is really provocative for people in the West to talk about Africa should be industrialized. We never hear any leader in the West talking about industrialization in Africa. We talk about adaptable technology and so on and so forth. So in a discussion also in 2015 with the CPC Central Committee, President Xi Jinping focused on the question of innovation. We in the West use the term creativity, but in China they use more the innovation. And he says innovative development focuses on the drivers of growth. Our ability to innovate is inadequate. Our science and technology is not fully developed. This is 2015, and is unable to create momentum to support economic and social development. This is the Achilles heel for such a big country as China. End of quote. So concerning the primacy of human creativity to the so-called natural resources, Xi Jinping stressed, quote, "So we must consider innovation as the primary driving force of growth and the core in this whole undertaking. and human resources as a primary source to support development. We should promote innovation in theory, systems, science and technology, and culture, and make innovation the dominant theme in the work of the party and government and everyday activity of society, end of quote. So this is, we going back to the Alexander Hamilton's quote about the purpose of credit and money is to cherish the creative powers of the mind of the individual. This is the main source of, and my own work on economics generally is inspired by the work of Lyndon LaRouche, an American system economist. And he is actually, I worked with him before he passed away with the Schiller Institute. And actually we worked on, produced the first ever scientific study on the Eurasian land bridge or the new Silk Road, which now everybody is familiar with, but this is in 1997 already. But the work of Lyndon LaRouche in establishing physical economics as a science, as different than the classical science, is very important to understand. I have his book translated myself to Arabic, So You Wish to Learn All About Economics, which I recommend for everybody to study, but also to study the Belt and Road and what is the economics of the Belt and Road. It's very important to study the work of Lyndon LaRouche and our Schiller Institute generally. Lyndon LaRouche developed a few ways of how scientific discoveries, which is incommensurable in a sense in an economy, how they change the dynamics of an economy. When you insert a new technology, when you discover a new principle in science, in nature, how does that affect the whole production process? Because it's incommensurable in that sense. So LaRouche uses specific metrics for measuring economic progress caused by scientific and even cultural progress. And one of these metrics is what he called the potential population, the potential relative population density, which means how a society, a civilization can sustain not only the existing population, but the future growth of the population, the potential population in the future, using scientific, technological, and cultural discoveries and progress. So this is a very important metric. How many human beings can we sustain potentially using the technology we have today? And what technology do we need to develop to sustain even greater numbers of human beings? In the West, we think, you know, too many people is a negative thing, LaRouche, and we don't believe in that sense. More human beings means more creative minds if we develop it. The other metric is, of course, LaRouche develops is the energy flux density. It's how much energy you can concentrate on a workplace. For example, how much using a laser, for example, which is a new technological discovery, to cut metals can both increase the efficiency, but also reduce the amount of energy used compared to using the traditional ways of cutting metals. So it's a paradox because you can concentrate the same amount of energy or even less on a much smaller area of work. So this is also a very important metric. So in that sense, you know, the idea of scientific technological discoveries and progress and the development of the mind of the individual must be primary in understanding economics. Not money, not natural resources, not trade, not power politics. So in a sense, so this is very important. An additional concept which need to be understood in addition to the potential relative population density and energy flux density is the idea of economic platforms. We should use the economic platform rather than infrastructure because infrastructure is a diffuse, but the economic platform is very important concept to define the basis on which a society can function. And I think China, it represents a very good example, as I will show in my presentation, what an economic platform could mean. I hope this works now. Okay, I'm sorry that we couldn't hear Professor Ding Yifan. Hopefully we'll make it available on YouTube so people can watch it again. But he references, as I mentioned, President Xi Jinping in 2015 talked about the lack of innovation in economy, and then actually the idea of so-called Made in China 2025 was launched in 2015. By 10 years, within 10 years, China was planning to become a world leader in 10 main sectors: information technology, automated machine tools and robotics, aerospace and aeronautical equipment. That has been achieved, all these achieved. Maritime equipment and high-tech shipping. China is a world leader. Modern rail transport equipment. China is, again, a world leader. New energy vehicles and equipment. That's very well known. China is leading in the world. Power equipment for hydropower, for nuclear power, for coal power, and others. Agricultural equipment. China is becoming a world leader also in agricultural equipment. The new materials. China is a world leader in rare earth metals, refining and production. One of the sectors where still China is lagging behind is in the biotechnology and advanced medical products. So China has been able 1 year ahead of time to accomplish all these shift from the low quality, high quantity economic industrial production to this high quality level. And it will have implications for the Belt and Road and development in Africa, Asia, and other parts of the world. One of the concepts which LaRouche develops when we have these maps of the new Silk Road, Belt and Road, what we have to think about is the idea of a development corridor. It's not, the railways are not to ship goods from China to Europe. It is useful for trade, but the concept should be to develop the areas between China and Europe, between A and B, what happens along the way. And therefore, this idea of the economic belt, the term President Xi used in 2013, is the idea of the development corridor, which is 100 to 150 meter wide corridor. At the center of it, either you have a river, water canals, high-speed rail, highways, oil and gas pipelines, electricity lines, and around them you build modern industrial and agricultural centers and urban centers. So this is the concept which should be promoted when we talk about the Belt and Road. It's a development initiative. It's not a trade initiative. Trade comes as a byproduct when we do these things. China itself had 3 main development corridors or belts, the Beijing-Tianjin belt corridor. We have the Greater Bay Area, which you have here in the, which is integrating all of Guangdong province into one large city, one large economy. The most important aspect of China's modernization and high quality development was to change. President Xi, in his speech I quoted, he talks about imbalanced development, because we had an enormous economic development in the coastal areas when China was opening up. All the industries were placed on the coastal areas, and that created enormous imbalance. While in the inland, you had still poverty and backwardness. So China shifted this policy by the policy of going west, the Western regions development strategy, and establishing these development corridors. And the Yangtze River corridor, which is like several thousand kilometers long, is a perfect example of this idea of a development corridor. I explain these things within my study, which I will publish soon as a video, on China's high-speed rail system development, why it is worth studying in terms of understanding economics, not understanding, how to make people travel easier and faster. It's an integrated part of China's physical economic development. So this is the same idea of the belt or the development corridor, around which we now have all these massive industrial cities in China, who have also become integral to the Belt and Road initiative. You have Chengdu, Chongqing, Changsha, Nanchang, Wuhan, Hefei, and so on and so forth, all the way to Beijing. So this is a perfect example, which is worth studying by other nations, because in other nations, we also have rivers, we have this type of corridors, but it's quite backward. So in that sense, understanding China's high-speed rail development should be seen in this light. And the economic platform with the high-speed rail system at its core. So this is a very interesting and also fascinating story. I'll just have to just read for you from my study of how China developed the high-speed rail, and the fact that this is not simply a very amazing, fascinating development, but if we look at how the China high-speed rail was started in 2002 and what it took to build the world's most advanced high-speed rail sector, the plan, brought together 6 super large companies, China's largest industrial companies, 25 universities, 11 scientific research institutes, 51 national laboratories and engineering centers, and a scientific and technological team composed of 68 academicians, 500 professors, and over 10,000 engineers and technicians. This is how China managed to absorb technology and build its own high-speed rail. Of course, they learned a lot from the Japanese Shinkansen technology and the German technology. So this understanding how the high-speed rail was built and what it took in terms of scientific, technological, and human resources to build is very important. As I said, I had the privilege of traveling a lot in China with using the high-speed rail, and hopefully I will manage to get this study done as a video. But this is mainly the concept. So we have here matched the Belt and Road corridors, mainly the land-based corridors, and matched it with our own, or from the Schiller Institute and Lyndon LaRouche's concept of the world land bridges. And these are all actually possible to build today with the existing technology, including connecting Asia to America across the Bering Strait. So this is the kind of perspective and understanding we need to have to understand the Belt and Road Initiative itself. As I said, China has a positive view of development in Africa, industrialization, but infrastructure and building the economic platform becomes crucial. But to understand the elements of developing a physical economy on a global scale requires understanding what we hope to develop as the Belt and Road economics. And we are having discussions with Chinese academicians and others to make this as a formal scientific branch of economics. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope I didn't take too much of the time.
No, well, thank you, Hussein. That was extremely enlightening. I think that some of the framework for the foundation of physical economy is becoming more clear. These are scientific concepts. I underline, this is not ideology. This transcends ideology. It is the foundation for, ironically, as Professor Glenn Diesen said, the American system was built on the idea of Western development of the United States, exactly what China is doing now in Xinjiang and Tibet, where I have personally visited and seen. These are scientific concepts and they embrace the idea of global development, of elevating human society, and continuing a process of increased development and productivity, which has no real limit, except to the degree that we break through in understanding the possibility for exploring even beyond our own planet in generations that will be coming. This is something the Chinese are already doing in terms of exploring the far side of the moon and bringing back samples of what we know is helium-3. Helium-3 is a resource that is not available and on the Earth's surface because the atmosphere in the Earth prevents it, whereas on the moon it does not. And this is a resource which is essential in the development of fusion technology, which is a form of nuclear technology that would provide virtually unlimited energy, not alone for energy production, but for travel in ultimately in space on a more practical basis. In addition, my remarks I will make now, but I apologize, unfortunately, for the technical problem to Professor Ding. As my colleague says, we will publish his remarks because it's very important that he is speaking from the standpoint of an expert in China as to how they are moving forward, as my colleague elaborated. And this is very important for people here in the West to also understand that there is a history of economic development which once had a fundamental aspect of driving Western development economy that is no longer being applied. And if we would start to apply that and end the game of casino monetary speculation, which is collapsing in any event, we could join hands together with China in transforming the world economically. And that should be the perspective. That's win-win, but it also has a certain moral aspect, which is often left out when people talk about economy, as if morality and human commitment to what we could call the common good has no place or a minimal place in economic thinking. It absolutely does have, and it does not contradict the foundation of improving conditions of life. In fact, it contributes fundamentally to it. I will mention one thing which I think is quite interesting, just as a fact of China's perspective in high quality development. This is from the Hamilton Center of Industrial Strategy. It's from Information Technology and Innovation Foundation. It's a new report reveals that the US is up to 15 years behind China in nuclear power development. China has 27 nuclear reactors currently under construction, and the average construction timeline for each reactor is about 7 years, far faster than other nations. And it intends to build 150 new reactors between what was 2020 and 2035. So they are also China is leading in the development and launch of cost-competitive small nuclear reactors. Now, that is the innovation that led the United States in its foundation to become a great developing manufacturing nation, which had the perspective of aiding, as Glenn Diesen pointed out, not alone its own internal improvements, but improvements in other parts of the world. The problem came up when the imperial interests of the British to dominate and then corrupted the United States after World War II to adopt the same model, that we have been operating on a speculative, non-productive perspective that is failing. And rather than working with China in their success, they are threatened by the idea that China is doing what is naturally scientific and beneficial. And when we return to our own positive history, we have no problem working together. That's science. That's not ideology. It has nothing to do with if you wish to be a socialist or another form of political thinking. And that should be what we take out of this, and hopefully elaborate and engage more experts and more scholars in opening this kind of dialogue, even in the best sense here in Sweden and other parts of Europe, and eventually being able to bring these ideas into the mainstream media for a free intellectual debate and discussion. Now, the only thing I will add is something that I think is actually quite significant in this concept, which is the person who has most actually been the greatest influence on my thinking and also on the thinking of the gentleman, Mr. Lyndon LaRouche, who has been the latest modern elaborator and creative thinker of economics from the United States. He has passed away, but his ideas certainly are to be studied, understood, and evaluated for what they are. But what inspired Mr. LaRouche was the thinking of a philosopher and a polymath born in Germany at that time it was the Holy Roman Empire, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. And he wrote a text which has actually the beginning of Mr. LaRouche's book, which Mr. Askary referred to. So you wish to learn all about economics. It's called Society and Economy. And I will just read a brief portion. In this short work and in another longer essay, Gottfried Leibniz developed a scientific conception of Christian economy. In this particular essay, Leibniz argued that the entire purpose of society is to release the artisans from their misery. To accomplish this, Leibniz proposes that society play a positive role in fostering a harmony of interest among merchants and artisans through the development of national industry. He speaks about the moral aspect of civilization in the form of what characterizes the fundamental of the human mind, what is called the creative, what we call the creative principle, that human beings are not like animals. They are unique in their capacity to develop expressions in the form of new innovations, but also in the form of cultural contributions, great art, great music, and expressing and being able to transmit great discoveries from one generation to the next. Now, Leibniz understood these ideas also not alone from the vantage point of the nature of the human mind, but also from the standpoint of how and what is the nature of the universe in which we live, which has harmonic orderings that are part of a reflection of the human thought process. And in that sense, when we behave less than creative, we are degrading our capacities to the level of beasts. And this is unfortunately still a problem in terms of the present status of what is operating as political policy in the world today. This is a way, these pioneering discussions that we have taken up of elevating and highlighting the foundation, which I encourage everyone to join us in further elaborating and studying. Because out of this, you get an idea that human development has a universal perspective that we can all participate and contribute to. And there are criteria for how we can approach this. I think that we have succeeded quite well in all of the contributors and the speakers in laying the groundwork for this. I want to thank everyone for their contributions to this discussion. And I think that we will now have the opening possibilities for all of the participants to be able to raise questions. And what we will, when we do this, we will no longer record the webinar, so that everyone who has questions and wants to explore or ask about some of the points that have been taken up can do so, and feel free that you will not have to be seen in any public context.